Number 5, we've got a couple of indicator words here helping us identify the conclusion and the premise statements. We have therefore, which indicates two things. One, the statement that follows is the conclusion of the argument, and two, the statement that precedes that conclusion indicator is one of the premises. But we also have the word since coming right after the word therefore, indicating that there's been a premise embedded between the conclusion indicator and the conclusion statement. I chose to represent the terms of this argument as follows. H represents public schools that teach secular humanism. R represents public schools that teach religion, and P represents public schools. If you chose different letters to represent the terms of this argument, that's okay. You just want to create for yourself a little cross-reference so that you can determine, so you can compare your argument with the one that I'm going to show you here. Using these as my terms and my letters representing the terms, I translated the argument into symbolic categorical statements as follow. My conclusion says some P or R, second premise says some P or H, and my premise says all H or R. Now, there's a couple of things you want to take note of. You want to make sure that your first premise is an A statement and that your second premise and conclusion are I statements. However, you might have different expressions of the second premise and your conclusion because the second premise and conclusion are both I statements, and I statements can be converted. So if you have a second premise that says all H or P, that's okay. If you have a conclusion that says all R or P, that's okay too. You just want to make sure that you have everything else arranged in standard form so that your major term of your conclusion appears up here in the first premise and your minor term of the conclusion appears somewhere in the second premise. But again, the second premise and conclusion in your version of the argument might be conversions of the statements in my argument. That's okay. When we mark the Venn diagram for this argument, we get this. Areas 1 and 2 have been shaded out to show that all of the H's are R, and then to show that some P or H or some H or P, we mark an X right here in area 3, and then we see the conclusion that some P are R or some R are P, which seems to indicate that the argument is valid. We have only one term distributed. It's the subject of the first premise. It just so happens to be the middle term, so we've satisfied the first rule of categorical syllogisms. We don't have anything distributed in the conclusion, so rule number 2 doesn't apply. We don't have any negative statements, so rules 3 and 4 don't apply. And we don't have two universal premises, so rule number 5 doesn't comply. That indicates this argument in the form of AII figure 1, or maybe yours is AII in figure 3, is an unconditionally valid form of argument.